9 in the morning, he sat at the kitchen table and drank his coffee, early for him. The previous night, he had gone to bed early and sober because the prior night, he had gone to bed late and drunk. And now he was drinking coffee and he wasn't hungry for breakfast yet, so he decided to leave it at that. Just the coffee, with no intention of leaving the house, even though the day was bright and sunny and cold and windy, his favorite kind of day. The kitchen table made him a little sad, or perhaps wistful is the word, unless it was the wind making him wistful or sad. It was a contributing factor anyway, but mostly it was the table. Because he remembered all the good conversations and all the parties that started right there in that room, around that table. But he also remembered it as the scene of many arguments, intense discussions, and tears, because all that happens in every kitchen everywhere, including his, no matter how happy the household. It's in the nature of kitchens and also in the nature of couples to hold discontent alongside contentment, equally in one hand and in the other, just as the warmth of the kitchen causes decay to flourish on the same countertops where meals are prepared. And so it made him sad, or wistful, because 2 days earlier, on the morning of the day he got drunk and went to sleep late, he and his girlfriend passed a group of men in suits down by the ferry building, all of them on phones, talking confidentially within the hearing of all. And so he turned to his girlfriend and said, "Men in suits are always plotting something." And she said, "Better than planning nothing," which was aimed at him, of course, and which caused an argument out of them. But 8 hours later, when he asked in a moment of irritation, the cork having broken in the neck of the wine bottle, "So you'd really prefer a well-paid schemer, someone who would stab you in the back?" Not that he always felt that way about men in suits. But that morning, as the group had passed, he heard one say, "Bill, I heard that. Your hold wasn't working. I heard that," followed by a laugh that was short of a threat, but certainly this side of extortion. And it offended him, our man in the kitchen with his coffee. It offended his old-fashioned feelings about fair play, that anybody should use blackmail in the course of a business deal, which was supposed to be honorable, a meeting of minds, where the momentary advantages were exploited tacitly, without any fuss made. But then again, what did he know about business? What would he know? Another thought occurred to him then, too late because the words were already out, had already struck his girlfriend's ear and were causing the intended offense, the insult to her intelligence, or perhaps to her sense of right and wrong, her sense of fair play. But as he tried to work the worm of the corkscrew back into the cork, only to end up pushing it still further into the bottle, he thought, what if he had misunderstood? What if, in fact, the man in the suit with the cell phone pressed to his ear, the one who had chortled about hearing something not meant for his ears, what if he were offering not a threat but a gesture of goodwill, that whatever he overheard was innocuous, his adversary asking an assistant to bring some information, for example, while he thought he was on hold, that he said nothing damaging, and that the man near the ferry building had been offering him a pass, that the laugh meant, "I'm giving you this one for free. Next time I will listen in silence, and anything you say can and will be used against you." But on the other hand, the man in the suit himself might have been being played, or so reflected our man in the kitchen, with a corkscrew half inserted into a cork that kept sliding disastrously towards the wine, despite his best efforts. Before his girlfriend even had time to retort to his insult, he was thinking about the man at the other end of the line, the adversary, whose broken hold may itself have been a ploy to test the good faith of his co-negotiator. It was possible that the adversary didn't even have an assistant present, though he certainly had an assistant. That he simply said to the empty room, and here he imagined a room with a large desk and a computer with a very large screen, a room that still smelled of carpet glue and paint, but was illuminated by the light from vast windows. This was no underling forced to labor day after day under the clammy glow of fluorescent bulbs. This was a man of enough power, he was entitled to use the sun itself to see his papers and paper clips. And to this empty room, under his breath so as not to be overheard, as you do when issuing a confidential command even when nobody is listening, just in case, he said, "Raphael, fetch me the file on the Greenwood development," and waited for the reaction from the line. And when he heard none, decided to push once more, to suggest to the absent Raphael that he make more of an effort to be on time in the future. A reprimand that came naturally, because he was annoyed by Raphael's habit of coming in quite a bit late. But he was also inclined to let it slide, because he had feelings for Raphael that held him in thrall. Raphael had a power over him, and Raphael knew it. He wanted to hear Raphael say his name, William, with gratitude, and even with lust. You know what I mean. And even though William knew it would never happen, he still was unable to deliver in person the reprimand he delivered to the empty room, which prompted the asshole in San Francisco, the guy who was obstructing his progress on the Greenwood deal, to say, "Bill, I heard that. Your hold wasn't working. I heard that." And then William knew that his adversary was the type to deal honestly. But if you presented him with an opportunity too tempting, he would take it without a word and stab you in the back. And so the Greenwood deal-maker thanked his adversary, the asshole in San Francisco, for letting him know before he made an ass of himself, which was itself kind of a backhanded compliment, a mild reproach, as if to say, "Thanks, but you're obviously a chump," because anybody with even one half-working testicle would have listened on in silence until he had information he could exploit for his own gain. or his company's, whichever. And his thanks had the air of a trainer congratulating a dog he suspects is really a little too stupid to be much good to anybody ever. A cheerful mutt who can barely even heel without a yank on the leash, let alone something as complicated as fetching. And as the Greenwood dealer half thought through this chain and smiled at his own skill at psychological gamesmanship, who should walk in but Raphael, startling and confusing the powerful man with the enormous windows behind him. Raphael with his black stubble and lean body. Mr. Greenwood wanted to run his fingers down the boy's spine. And in this moment of lustful confusion at the boy's presence, he forgot himself, our powerful deal-maker. He slipped up, and he said, he nearly yelped, just to have something to say, and because it was at the top of his mind, "Raphael, fetch me the file on the Greenwood development." And as Raphael turned around to face the file cabinets, the deal-maker listened a moment to the silence on the line and realized he had just completely blown the whole game, which puzzled his adversary in San Francisco, who wondered for a moment why the Greenwood guy had barked like that. Raphael seemed to be a pretty bad employee, chronically late, and had to be asked twice to perform a simple task, so why did he keep him around anyway? Maybe Raphael was somebody's relative, some kind of pet. These real estate guys were always dogged by nepotism. It was forever causing them trouble. And so he laughed and said, "Gee, Bill, sounds like Raphael's kind of a pain in the ass." At which there was a silence and nothing, and nervous in the face of this total absence of response, laughed again and moved the phone to his left ear and pursued it by saying, "I mean, people like that hold an organization back." And Bill interrupted him, saying, "Thanks for the management advice," and changed the subject back to a detail of the Greenwood deal. And then our man in the kitchen, having imagined all this while cautiously attempting to gain purchase on the cork with the end of the corkscrew, but failing and failing, only succeeded in pushing it farther down the neck of the bottle, and his girlfriend said, well, at least a schemer would have some kind of concept where he was headed, at least he would know what he wanted, and the cork at last fell into the wine with a plonk, and he cursed. Such was the beginning of an argument that would turn out to be their last. After hours of attacking one another with insults, and the fact was, he was a schemer himself, as much a schemer as any guy in a suit. He'd been scheming for a long time to start a fight that would be so bad they would have to break up, because in fact he was tired of her. He had begun to think of her as a little stupid, and she didn't even seem to like him really, what with the way she was always insulting him, calling him lazy and aimless, both of which were true, but he didn't think these were bad qualities. And so on this night, with the cork bobbing in the wine, he laid into her hard right there at the kitchen table. They sat face to face and shouted, and the counters piled up behind them with unwashed dishes and rotting food scraps. He accused her of unfairness, of playing dirty, that she wasn't with him in good faith. And before even an hour had passed, he heard himself say he didn't even want to run his fingers down her back. That's how distasteful she had become to him. That he missed feeling that kind of desire and hoped one day he'd feel it again, but it would have to be with somebody else, which was cruel to say. And it hurt her more than he intended. She made a pained yelp and went into the bedroom, packed some of her things, and 5 minutes later was out the door. Then he was upset. He wanted her back. He regretted provoking the argument and pushing it so far. He texted her and got no response. He poured himself a glass of wine, intending to have just one, but of course he ended up drinking the whole bottle. And he passed the next day in a hungover haze, wandering around the city on foot. And during his late lunch, he got a text from her that it was over as far as she was concerned. She'd figure out about her stuff later. And that was that. She didn't respond to any of his messages, and he went to bed that night, early and sober. And when he woke up the next morning and had his coffee alone in the kitchen, feeling wistful about all the time spent with her right there, he decided to skip breakfast and not leave the house, even though it was his favorite kind of day, bright and sunny, cold and windy. Because his scheme, such as it was, had worked, and it appeared he was free to start over, beginning right then at 9 in the morning, with a cup of coffee at hand, and before him, the whole world of possibility. All right.